The first voice I truly recognized was hers, Claire's. My wife. Sweet Claire, who always knew how to sound like she cared even when she didn't. She was speaking softly, but even in my weakened state, I could hear the edge beneath her words. He won't make it, not for long. The swelling's too severe. Then another voice answered, deep and calm, dripping with clinical detachment, Dr. Randall Mercer. My doctor. My wife's new lover. Either way, we need to be patient. His policy stipulates a waiting period. Once he's declared brain dead, the payout triggers automatically. Payout. Brain dead. Life insurance. My life. It should have crushed me, hearing this. But instead, I felt something else rise in my chest, a slow burning cold fury. They thought I was gone. They were planning their future, a future built on my grave. My wife and my doctor. The betrayal was so sharp it cut through the fog in my brain like a scalpel. I couldn't move yet, but my mind was awake. Days turned into nights, and I listened. I learned. Claire would visit, always during visiting hours. She'd hold my hand for show, brush my hair for the nurse's benefit, and whisper sweet nothings to me like some devoted wife waiting for a miracle. But when the nurses left, the mask would slip. He's practically gone, she whispered one evening. The sooner you sign those final forms, the sooner we can move on, Randall. Randall would only respond when no one was around, slipping into my room late at night like a lover sneaking through the window. I told you, Claire, we need to follow protocol. If the board suspects foul play, they'll audit the whole thing. I absorbed every word. They had grown bold, confident in my supposed vegetative state. But the one thing they hadn't accounted for was me waking up early. The therapy session started once my body began responding. The doctors called it a miraculous recovery, though I saw the flash of panic in Randall's eyes every time I opened mine. Claire's fake tears returned, but her trembling hands betrayed her. Darling, you're back. She sobbed, squeezing my hand a bit too hard, as if trying to test whether I was really there. I played along at first, weak, disoriented, confused. Let them believe I didn't remember anything. It bought me time. Time to plan. I demanded privacy from everyone except the nurses. I smiled at Claire. I thanked Randall for his amazing care. Every lie they spun, I acted like I swallowed it whole. But behind closed doors, I contacted the one person I trusted, my attorney, Mark Delaney. Mark had been my college roommate, a former prosecutor who owed me more than a few favors. He walked into my hospital room 3 weeks after my miraculous recovery, briefcase in hand. I scanning my condition. I saw the surprise flicker behind his cool expression. You're alive, he said quietly. And I'm guessing you've got a hell of a story. I nodded. My voice was raspy but clear. Mark, they tried to bury me alive. And that was the beginning of my return, not just to life, but to vengeance. Mark sat beside my hospital bed, his jaw tight, eyes darting occasionally toward the door, as if half expecting someone to burst in. I couldn't blame him. The gravity of what I was telling him was enough to get anyone's nerves twitching. So let me get this straight, Mark said, keeping his voice low. While you were lying here, half dead, your wife and your doctor have been carrying on an affair and plotting to split your life insurance once you conveniently passed away. I nodded. Every word. I heard it all. And you're certain? No. Mental confusion? Medication-induced hallucinations? I met his eyes, steady as I could manage. I wish it was. But no. It's all real. They're trying to kill me, Mark. He exhaled slowly, then rubbed his hands together. All right. We don't go to the police. Not yet. The moment you make this public, they'll deny everything. She'll cry, he'll cite doctor-patient privilege, and you'll look like the bitter, delusional husband. So what do we do? I rasped. Mark leaned in closer. We set the trap. We make them hang themselves. He laid out the plan piece by piece while the heart monitor softly beeped beside me. First, surveillance. Mark had contacts, private investigators who specialized in quiet, off-the-books operations. They would trail Claire and Randall, record their meetings, monitor their calls. We needed hard proof, irrefutable evidence. Second, financial tracing. Mark suspected they were already funneling money. Insurance fraud wasn't as simple as cashing a check. Big sums have to be laundered, disguised. His forensic accountant would follow the money trail. Third, delay the payout. As my legal guardian, Claire would have to petition for certain authorizations once I was officially declared unfit to make decisions. But now that I was awake, I still had legal standing. We'd quietly freeze any move she tried to make on my behalf. While the pieces moved behind the scenes, I played my part on stage, a frail husband working hard to recover, supported by his ever-devoted wife. Claire visited daily, fussing over me, trying to assess how much I remembered. "You're doing so great, honey," she cooed, brushing my hair back. "The doctors say you might even be able to walk again soon." I smiled weakly, looking up at her with pretend gratitude. "All thanks to you." Inside, I was cataloging every lie, every nervous glance. Randall, on the other hand, started keeping his distance. Coward. But every now and then, I'd catch him watching me from across the nurse's station, like a man standing on a crumbling ledge. 2 weeks later, Mark came back, slipping into my hospital room like a shadow. "We got it," he whispered. "The PI caught them at the Ritz. They're meeting regularly, hotel rooms, dinner reservations, the whole cliché package." He pulled out his tablet and showed me the footage. There she was, my wife, laughing in Randall's arms. Lips locked, hands exploring each other like teenagers sneaking behind the gym. It burned. Even after everything, it still burned. But I forced myself to watch. I needed to feel it. The betrayal was fuel for what came next. "There's more," Mark said. "The accountant traced a joint account they opened in the Caymans. The payment started 2 months after your accident." I nodded slowly. "Good. You sure you're ready for the next step?" he asked. My voice was steel now. "Let's invite them to the courtroom." Mark grinned. "I thought you'd say that." The next phase required precision and patience. I had spent months lying helpless, but this time, I would be in control. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was an art form. Mark worked fast, filing a series of subtle motions with the court under the guise of protecting my financial interests during recovery. Nothing that would alert Claire or Randall. Nothing that would make them panic. Just enough to tie their hands legally, restricting access to my assets, especially my life insurance. Claire started noticing the changes. One evening, she arrived at the hospital, wearing one of her designer outfits, another quiet insult, considering it was paid for by the very man she tried to bury. She sat by my bed, her fake concern thick like syrup. "Honey, the insurance company's being difficult," she said, biting her lip in that manufactured pout I once found endearing. "They're delaying everything because you're technically still, well, here?" I kept my face soft, eyes wide with manufactured innocence. "That's frustrating. But I trust you'll handle it, sweetheart." She smiled, but I saw it, the crack. The smallest glint of annoyance, quickly masked by her saccharine tone. "Of course, darling. I'll take care of everything. All you have to do is focus on getting better." She was getting nervous. That was good. Meanwhile, Randall was unraveling faster. The private investigators reported that he'd started drinking more heavily, snapping at hospital staff, and losing his temper during private phone calls. His whole polished persona was cracking under the weight of their scheme. Mark's team intercepted one call between Randall and Claire that made my blood turn cold and hot all at once. Randall, whispering, "We need to move faster, Claire. The longer he lingers, the more complicated this gets." Claire, snapping, "What do you want me to do? Smother him with a pillow?" "Be patient." Randall, "You said this would be easy. Collect the payout. Start fresh." Now we're cornered. If he talks, if he remembers anything, we're done. I did remember. Every damn word. Mark grinned when we played the recording in his office. "This is better than I could have hoped. Audio, financial records, hotel surveillance, it's airtight." "And the judge?" I asked. "Already briefed. The hearing's scheduled for next month. Claire thinks it's just a routine petition regarding your medical care and finances." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "She has no idea she's walking into her own funeral." I chuckled for the first time in months. A bitter, dry laugh. Perfect. The weeks leading up to the hearing were excruciating. Claire kept up the charade, visiting daily, playing the grieving but hopeful wife. Every touch, every kiss on the cheek made my stomach churn. But I endured it, knowing every sickening moment would fuel what was coming. The night before the hearing, Mark visited me one final time to review everything. "The judge will hear the full case in open court. Financial fraud, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, attempted murder. Once we present the evidence, they'll crumble." "And the press?" I asked. He smiled wickedly. "Already tipped off. Courtroom's going to be packed. Cameras. Reporters. The whole show." "Good," I whispered. "I want the world to see what they are." I barely slept that night. Not from fear. From anticipation. By morning, I was wheeled into that courtroom, wearing my tailored suit, clean-shaven, alert, very much alive. And as Claire and Randall walked in, all smiles and confidence, They didn't yet realize their entire world was about to be blown to pieces. The courtroom was a quiet hum of whispers when I was wheeled in. Cameras clicked like distant insects. Reporters filled the gallery. This wasn't just a legal hearing anymore. It was a spectacle. Exactly as I wanted. Claire sat at her attorney's table, perfectly poised in her navy blue suit, her respectable wife uniform. Randall slithered in shortly after, sitting a few rows behind her, pretending to be just another concerned party. But I saw the beads of sweat forming on his forehead already. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Judge Holloway, entered the room and called the hearing to order. Mr. Garrison, you're petitioning for full control over your financial assets due to allegations of misconduct by your legal guardian? Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice firm, stronger than anyone expected. Claire's lawyer stood up first, smirking. Your Honor, my client fully supports her husband's recovery. We're simply here to ensure his best interests are protected. These claims of misconduct are unfortunate misunderstandings, no doubt a result of his recent medical trauma. Claire nodded along, blinking those wide, fake innocent eyes. I didn't even look at her. Mark stood up next. Calm, smooth, deadly. With respect, Your Honor, this is not about misunderstandings. This is about criminal conspiracy, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. My client has been victim to an elaborate plot orchestrated by his wife and his attending physician. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The judge's eyebrows arched sharply. Those are serious allegations, Mr. Delaney. Do you have evidence? Mark pressed a button on his tablet and handed it to the clerk. The large screen behind the judge flickered to life. It started with the video footage, Claire and Randall, laughing as they checked into the Ritz. Holding hands. Kissing. The timestamp made it clear, this wasn't some distant indiscretion. This was ongoing. Claire's face drained of color instantly. The first crack in her carefully painted mask. Next came the audio recordings. Randall's voice filled the courtroom. If he talks, if he remembers anything, we're done. Claire's whispered response. What do you want me to do? Smother him with a pillow? The room fell into a stunned silence. Claire's lawyer stammered. Your Honor, this is illegally obtained. But Judge Holloway raised a hand, cutting him off. Quiet. I'll decide what's admissible. Mark continued. In addition, Your Honor, we have full financial records of secret offshore accounts opened by Mrs. Garrison and Dr. Mercer. Funds that were to be deposited upon Mr. Garrison's death. You'll find the full paper trail in Exhibit C. The clerk handed the thick file to the judge. The flipping of pages echoed like drum beats. Claire was now visibly shaking. Randall's hands fidgeted in his lap, his eyes darting for an exit that didn't exist. Judge Holloway looked up, her voice razor sharp. Mrs. Garrison, do you have anything to say? For the first time since this all began, Claire lost her composure. This is insane, she hissed. He's manipulating everything. He's setting me up. I smiled, the kind of smile that says, I've waited months for this. Claire, I said, my voice calm but cutting. The only thing I manipulated was giving you enough rope to hang yourself. Reporters scribbled furiously. Camera flashes exploded. The judge banged her gavel once, silencing the chaos. This court will recess for 1 hour while I review the full evidence. But I will say this, these accusations are not only credible, but highly disturbing. As the courtroom emptied for recess, I locked eyes with Claire one last time. She mouthed the words, you'll regret this. I mouthed back, no, Claire. You will. The hour recess dragged like wet cement hardening around their ankles. Claire sat in the corner of the waiting area, her attorney whispering frantically in her ear. She was pale now. The kind of pale you see in a woman who knows the walls are closing in, but still clings to some fantasy of escape. Randall, for his part, was pacing like a caged animal, sweaty, disheveled, lips pressed thin. Mark sat beside me, cool as ice. They'll turn on each other soon, he whispered. Just watch. And right on cue, it began. Randall couldn't take the pressure. He stormed over to Claire, forgetting the dozens of reporters nearby. You told me this would work, he hissed. You said it was foolproof. She snapped back, loud enough for anyone nearby to hear. You're the one who pushed me into this, Randall. You promised me the insurance payout would cover everything. I was ready to pull the plug. You wanted more time. They weren't even trying to lower their voices now. They were cracking, just like Mark predicted. The media sharks circling outside gobbled up every word. Mark leaned in again. Public collapse. Good for court, better for headlines. The bailiff called us back in. The courtroom doors swung open. Every spectator rushed back to their seats, hungry for the bloodbath that was about to unfold. Judge Holloway returned, her expression carved from stone. "I have reviewed the submitted evidence," she began, voice steady. "The audio, financial records, surveillance footage, and timeline all point to a coordinated conspiracy between the defendants." Claire's attorney tried to interject, but she shut him down with a cold stare. "Don't speak." She turned her attention directly to Claire. "Mrs. Garrison, not only have you violated your fiduciary responsibility as your husband's legal guardian, but this court sees sufficient preliminary evidence of intent to commit insurance fraud and conspiracy to harm Mr. Garrison." Then to Randall. "Dr. Mercer, you have disgraced your medical oath and engaged in an egregious abuse of professional power." Claire's breathing was shallow now, her chest rising and falling like a trapped animal. Effective immediately, the judge continued, "Mrs. Garrison is stripped of all financial authority over Mr. Garrison's estate. The court will issue criminal referrals for both of you to the district attorney for further prosecution. Bailiffs, take them into custody." The sound of handcuffs clicking filled the room like gunfire. Claire's eyes darted wildly as two deputies grabbed her arms. "You can't do this. This is my life. This was supposed to be my life." Randall didn't fight. His head dropped in defeat as the cuffs locked around his wrists. The courtroom was silent, almost reverent, except for the snapping cameras. Every reporter in that room had their front-page story before noon. As they were led away, Claire locked eyes with me one last time. Gone was the mask of sweetness, of control, of superiority. All that remained was rage and panic. I didn't blink. I wanted her to see it. The man she thought she buried had returned stronger than ever. The judge's gavel banged once more. Court adjourned. After the handcuffs, after the courtroom cleared, after the media trucks rolled away, that's when the real work began. Mark and I sat in his office that evening, the city skyline glowing behind him. The adrenaline had worn off, but something sharper took its place: satisfaction. "They'll both be arraigned tomorrow morning," Mark said, pouring 2 glasses of bourbon. "Multiple felony counts. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted murder charges pending full investigation." I raised my glass but didn't sip. "And Claire?" I asked. "She's facing the harsher end. As your legal guardian, the betrayal carries extra weight. Abuse of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of assets, you name it. Randall might cut a deal, but he's still looking at serious prison time." I finally took a slow sip, letting the burn settle. "She'll flip on him." "Oh, absolutely." Mark smirked. "But Randall's smart enough to flip first. My money's on him throwing her under the bus to save himself." "Good. Let them eat each other alive." In the days that followed, my story exploded everywhere: headlines, talk shows, legal blogs dissecting every detail. Husband in coma uncovers wife and doctor's deadly scheme. The public couldn't get enough, and neither could I. The insurance company, desperate to avoid further scandal, froze the entire payout. My financial investigator helped them comb through every suspicious transaction Claire had made: fraudulent real estate, offshore accounts, even luxury items purchased under shell companies. Every dollar she tried to steal came back to me with interest. But there was one more piece. One last nail I wanted hammered in. Mark's contact at the DA's office called us in confidentially. "They're ready to offer Randall a deal," she said, sliding the paperwork across the table. "Full confession. In exchange, he testifies against Claire." Mark read through it carefully, then looked at me. "Do you want to approve this?" I didn't even hesitate. "Yes. Let him confess. I want every disgusting detail of their affair read into public record. I want her sitting there while he throws her under the bus." Mark nodded. "You're a cold man, Ethan." I smiled for the first time that day. I wasn't always. But they made me this way. Weeks later, Randall took the stand at Claire's preliminary hearing. In excruciating detail, he laid out how they started seeing each other before my accident, how Claire confessed she couldn't divorce me because of the prenup, how they plotted to stage the life insurance payout as an accidental tragedy. Every sordid detail was now a permanent part of the record. And Claire? She sat there stone-faced at first, then slowly crumbling as Randall's betrayal hit her like a freight train. Her attorney tried to object multiple times, but the judge let Randall speak freely. By the time he was done, Claire's attorney asked for a recess, but everyone knew her legal defense was circling the drain. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Randall as he was escorted back to county jail. Cameras caught his last desperate words. "She promised me. She said we'd be rich. I gave up everything for her." Pathetic. Claire wouldn't be far behind him. and prison would not be kind to either of them. The trial date came faster than I expected. Or maybe I was just savoring the countdown too much. By then, Claire had been denied bail twice. The judge considered her a flight risk. Good call, considering her little nest egg in the Caymans. I sat front row every day in that courtroom, dressed sharp, clean-shaven, healthier than I'd looked since before the accident. My presence wasn't required. I was simply witnessing, and she saw me every time she walked in wearing that county-issued jumpsuit. The fury in her eyes, the venom hiding beneath her fake composure, that was my fuel. Mark sat beside me, quietly enjoying the show. The prosecution dismantled her defense like clockwork. Fraudulent wire transfers? Verified. Multiple hotel reservations under aliases? Verified. Audio recordings? Admitted. Randall's full confession? Devastating. But what broke her, truly broke her, was the surveillance footage the private investigators captured. Not the hotels. Not even the affair. It was a video they recorded 1 week before my so-called scheduled expiration. In that video, she was sitting across from Randall in a private cafe, and her words were loud, clear, and fatal. If we don't move soon, he'll wake up. He's stronger than you think. And if he does, we are screwed. I never saw a jury turn that fast in my life. Every single one of them leaned forward as those words played, watching Claire squirm. Her attorney tried one last Hail Mary, of course. She was under emotional stress. This was grief manifesting as desperation. Right. Grief. I had to bite my tongue to stop myself from laughing in open court. By the end of week 2, the DA offered her a plea deal. A good one, too, by legal standards. 20 years. Eligible for parole after 12. It was mercy, frankly. But Claire? She refused. Her ego wouldn't let her admit defeat, even now. She still thought she could outmaneuver everyone. That maybe a tearful testimony might save her. That the world would somehow pity the poor widow trapped in an affair she couldn't escape. So she rolled the dice. And lost. The jury came back in under 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Fraud. Conspiracy. Attempted homicide. The judge gave her 35 years. No parole for at least 28. Randall got 15, thanks to his cooperation. The moment his sentence was read, he broke down right there at the defense table, sobbing into his hands. Claire didn't even look at him, cold to the bitter end. After sentencing, as she was escorted out in cuffs, she passed by my chair. For one last time, she locked eyes with me. But I was done speaking. There was nothing left to say. Let her sit with the silence. Let her sit with what she threw away. The house was oddly quiet after everything was over. No more lawyers. No more reporters parked outside. No more hospital rooms. Just me. Alone. And that was exactly how I wanted it. I walked through every room, every corner, tracing my fingers along the surfaces she once decorated like trophies. The expensive vases. The art pieces she insisted we buy to impress visitors. The $10,000 Persian rug I never liked. All of it was paid for with my hard work. My sacrifice. And she nearly threw it all away for some coward in a white coat. One by one, I stripped it down. I called a liquidation service that afternoon. They hauled it all out. Every shallow reminder of her was carted off and sold. I didn't want to live surrounded by ghosts. I wanted a clean slate. Mark called a few days later. His voice had that satisfied edge he always got when one of our little missions wrapped up nicely. By the way, the insurance company finally closed their investigation. And I asked, though I already knew. They ruled you as the sole beneficiary. Full payout. And thanks to your brilliant ex-wife, every fraudulent transaction she made is being reversed. With restitution penalties. The number was larger than I ever imagined. 7 zeros. Life insurance. Frozen assets. Restitution. I wasn't just surviving. I was wealthier than I'd ever been. But money wasn't the part that mattered. Not really. The revenge wasn't about dollars. It was about principle. She thought I was weak. Disposable. An obstacle standing between her and a better life. What she never understood was, men like me, we don't break. We endure. I wasn't some trophy husband she could discard when something shinier came along. I was the man who rebuilt himself from a hospital bed while they plotted my death inches away from my ear. I took a leave from work, a long one. Not because I had to. Because I could. I traveled. Private, quiet places. Remote islands. The kind of places where no one cared who I was or what happened. For the first time in years, I wasn't being manipulated or controlled. Every choice was my own. On one of those trips, I finally sat down and opened the old journal I used to write in before I met Claire. Back before the marriage, before the lies, before the coma. I flipped to a blank page. And I wrote. Asterisk, they thought they buried me. What they didn't realize was I was a seed. Asterisk, the media eventually moved on. That's the thing about public scandal. It burns hot, then dies cold. But some embers? They stay glowing for years. For Claire, the nightmare wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Once the criminal trial was done, the civil suits began. Her victims weren't just me. The insurance company came after her for fraud and damages. My private investigator discovered she had dipped into several of our joint charitable foundations, even funneled money from a scholarship fund I'd set up years earlier. The IRS got involved. So did the state tax board. By the time they were finished, her accounts were drained. Whatever scraps of her once glamorous lifestyle remained were auctioned off piece by piece. Jewelry, designer clothes, her luxury car, even the custom-built vanity she used every morning to apply her mask of innocence. Gone. Randall wasn't spared either. His medical license? Revoked. His reputation? Destroyed. He tried to move out of state after serving a chunk of his sentence. But in the digital age, your crimes follow you everywhere. Every job interview. Every background check. Every whispered conversation behind closed doors. There's no surgical residency program for disgraced doctors who plot murder for profit. Last I heard, he was flipping burgers somewhere in Arizona. A man who once stood over my hospital bed playing God was now arguing with teenagers about missing ketchup packets. Poetic. But the most satisfying part? The social circles that once worshipped Claire as some elegant, high-society hostess abandoned her like a leper. The same women who sipped champagne with her, who envied her perfect marriage, who praised her taste in fashion and furniture, now treated her name like poison. Because betrayal stains don't wash out. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my life on my terms. I invested smart, quiet, discreet. No lavish displays. No gaudy cars or penthouse apartments. That wasn't me. I bought a small lakefront property, peaceful, isolated, surrounded by nature. A place to breathe again. Mark stayed in touch. Every few weeks, we'd grab a drink, review some business opportunity, laugh about how spectacularly it had all blown up for them. Do you ever regret not confronting her sooner? He asked one night. I thought for a moment. No. Waiting let them hang themselves. I just handed them the rope. Mark chuckled and raised his glass. To patience. I raised mine. To consequences. 6 months after the dust had supposedly settled, I received a letter. No return address. Handwritten. That already told me everything I needed to know. When people don't want their names attached, it's always bad news. Inside was a single page, scribbled out like the last desperate words of someone who couldn't quite believe how far they'd fallen. Ethan. I know you must still be angry, but I need your help. Please consider visiting me. We need to talk. Claire. Pathetic. For a brief second, I almost admired the audacity. She must have been delusional enough to think I'd actually come crawling back to offer forgiveness, like she hadn't tried to erase me from existence for a payout. I showed it to Mark over lunch the next day. He skimmed the letter, smirked, and pushed his plate aside. She's fishing. Obviously. Probably thinks you'll visit. Play the "we were once in love" card. Maybe guilt you into funding her legal appeals or lobbying for early parole. Mark shook his head. Classic narcissist move. I nodded. I expected as much. What Claire didn't realize is that by sending that letter, she opened a door I had no intention of closing. I made a few quiet calls. First to the warden at the correctional facility. Then to one of my private investigators who specialized in, let's call it inmate lifestyle audits. Turns out, prison hadn't been kind to Claire. Her once pristine face had hardened. The stress, the fights, the reality of no longer controlling anything had carved deep lines into her skin. The prison hierarchy treated her like any other washed-up socialite who thought her name would protect her behind bars. They were happy to correct that misconception. She worked menial jobs now. Laundry shifts. Cleaning toilets. Occasionally kitchen duty, where she was monitored constantly after an incident with another inmate over food rations. My investigator sent me photographs. Not because I needed them, but because he knew I'd want to see the reality she now lived in. Gone was the designer wardrobe. Gone was the jewelry. Gone were the art galas and charity fundraisers. Now? Orange jumpsuits, harsh lighting, cold cinderblock walls. The second call I made was to the DA's office. I wasn't about to let her petition for any sentence reduction without opposition. Her first motion for early appeal was denied, publicly, definitively, and with a scathing statement from the judge. The court finds no remorse, only manipulation disguised as regret. I never wrote her back. Let her rot in that silence. Let her sit with every echo of what she destroyed. If there's one thing you learn watching people like Claire and Randall, they never really stop scheming. Even when they've lost, they convince themselves there's still some angle left to play. That's why, one afternoon, I received a message through Mark. Randall had reached out. I nearly laughed. Mark sat across from me, reading Randall's pathetic little offer off his phone. Mr. Garrison, I've had time to reflect. I realize now how far things went. I was manipulated too. I deeply regret my part. If there's any way I can assist you with future legal matters or public statements, I would gladly cooperate to show my remorse. I let Mark finish, though I could already feel the slow burn of disgust rise in my chest. He's angling for early release, I said flatly. Exactly, Mark replied. He's hoping you'll make some statement to the parole board on his behalf, or at the very least, not oppose it. I smirked. And in exchange, he gets what? A chance at a shorter sentence? Reputation rehab? A book deal later? Most likely all of the above, Mark said, leaning back. Frankly, if he were smart, he'd shut up and serve his time quietly. But we both know he's not that smart. I let Randall twist for a few weeks before responding through the proper channels. Official opposition filed. The statement was simple, clean, brutal. Mr. Mercer has not shown remorse. He has shown calculation. His attempted manipulation of both me and the legal system post-conviction demonstrates that he remains a threat to ethical standards in the medical field and the safety of others. I strongly oppose any consideration of early release. The parole board denied his request within days. The media got wind of it, of course. The headlines practically wrote themselves. Doctor's desperate plea rejected, Garrison refuses to forgive murder plot. Public opinion buried him even deeper. The court of public opinion never really forgives disgraced doctors who abuse trust. And just like that, Randall was where he belonged. Still sitting in his cell. Still wearing state-issued orange. Still answering to men half his intellect but twice his grit. Rumor had it, some of the other inmates had gotten word of what he tried to pull on me, on a man lying helpless in a coma. Let's just say, his remaining years wouldn't be comfortable. Mark and I toasted again that night. We didn't even have to say much anymore. We both knew. They weren't just defeated, they were eradicated. And I hadn't lifted a single illegal finger to make it happen. They walked into my trap all on their own. I hadn't planned on meeting anyone. Not for a long time. Maybe never. I was done playing the fool. Done with trusting the wrong people. But life has its own twisted sense of humor. Her name was Emily. We crossed paths at a business conference of all places, one I attended purely out of obligation. Mark had been hounding me to get back into public view, to remind the industry that I wasn't just the man who survived a scandal. I was still sharp, still building, still relevant. Emily wasn't like Claire, where Claire was polished, calculated, and always rehearsed. Emily was disarmingly real. She didn't come up to me because of the headlines. In fact, she barely mentioned them. We were seated next to each other during a seminar on corporate governance. The first thing she said to me was, "I hate these things. Nothing but power suits trying to outsmile each other." I chuckled, surprised. That's pretty accurate. Her eyes met mine, steady, no flinching, no fake deference. "You're Ethan Garrison, right?" "I am." "Well, don't take this the wrong way, but I admired how you handled that whole mess. Most people would have folded. You didn't." For a brief second, I felt something I hadn't in years, respect. Not flattery, not sympathy, just respect. We talked. Long after the seminar ended. Over coffee, over dinner, over too many late-night calls that reminded me what it felt like to simply have conversation again. One that didn't involve hidden motives or carefully rehearsed traps. She was sharp, ran her own mid-sized consulting firm, worked twice as hard as most men in her field, and wasn't interested in riding anyone's coattails. And that, ironically, made me nervous. Because this was exactly how it started with Claire once, too. Mark noticed. "You're playing with fire again," he warned one night, over bourbon. "I get it, she seems great. But you know better than anyone. The second time they stab you usually goes deeper." I nodded. "I'm aware. And that's why I'm not rushing anything." He smirked. "Good. You've built something rare, Ethan, peace. Don't gamble it for a pair of bright eyes and clever conversation. Trust me, I said, swirling my glass. Nobody gets close without earning it this time. But here's the thing no one tells you. Even after you've burned your entire past down, even after you've rebuilt the walls higher than before, there's always a small crack. That part of you that wants to believe again. Emily saw that crack. And she was smart enough to move slowly. Smart enough to never push. And that's why I didn't immediately pull away. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't betrayal. It's hope. 3 months. That's how long I let Emily into my world, piece by piece. She didn't ask about Claire. She didn't press about Randall. She treated me like a man with a future, not a tragedy with a headline. We met for dinners, walks, coffee on Sundays. Nothing intense. Nothing rushed. At first, I kept her at arm's length. No home visits. No deep dives into my past. I made excuses, travel, late work, privacy. But the truth was simpler than that. I was afraid. Not of her. Of me. Because the last time I let someone in, I wound up lying in a coma while they measured the payout on my death. So yeah, trusting again felt like playing Russian roulette. But Emily passed every unspoken test I gave her. She didn't flinch when I casually brought up betrayal in conversation. She didn't probe when I mentioned being taken advantage of. She didn't ask for gifts, favors, access, nothing. She didn't want anything from me except time. And that got under my skin in a way I hadn't expected. One night, we were sitting on the patio of my lake house, wine glasses untouched, silence between us thick but not uncomfortable. She looked at me and said, "You think I'm going to betray you, don't you?" I didn't respond. She nodded slowly. "It's okay. You don't have to answer. But you're watching me, measuring every move, like you're waiting for me to slip." Still, I said nothing. Then she added, "You've built a fortress, and it's impressive, but a man who never lets anyone in eventually becomes a prisoner in his own castle." That one hit harder than I expected, not because she was right, but because she said it without judgment. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I invited her into my home. No fanfare, no grand gesture, just a quiet text. "If you're free tonight, come by. Bring nothing, just yourself." She showed up that evening. No makeup, no fancy dress, just jeans, a hoodie, and a 6-pack of craft beer. I laughed when I saw her. "Really? You said bring nothing." I figured beer doesn't count. We talked for hours. I told her about the coma, about how Claire used to whisper to her lover while standing next to my bed, thinking I was already gone. Emily didn't interrupt. She didn't pity me. She just listened, and when I was done, she poured us another drink and said, "You lived. You won. And you didn't lose yourself in the process. That's rare. That's strength." For the first time in a long time, I started to believe I might not be broken after all. But trust? Real trust? That was still a few chapters away. Because as much as I wanted to believe in her, I knew the world had a way of testing you right when you thought you'd healed. And when that test came, she'd either prove herself completely, or she'd prove that I was right to doubt everything. It started with a phone call. Private number. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something, maybe instinct, made me answer. "Ethan." The voice was dry, older, cautious. "This is he. My name is Harold Lennox. I used to represent Claire, back during the civil proceedings." I sat up. Every muscle tightened instantly. "Why are you calling me? I'm not in practice anymore." But something came across my desk recently, a letter. It was intercepted in a mail sweep at the facility where she's being held. Claire. I hadn't heard her name spoken in months. She's been trying to reach someone. Not you, not Randall. A woman. A mutual acquaintance. A chill rolled through my spine. What woman? There was a pause. Then he said it. "Emily." I hung up. No goodbye. No pleasantries. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the house like a caged animal. Every step brought more fury, more suspicion. Emily. The one person I'd begun to let inside. And now this? Coincidence? Not in my world. I called Mark the next morning. "I need surveillance." On her. He didn't question it. He knew better. The next few days were agony. Emily continued to act the same. Sweet. Steady. Uninterested in anything I had. Only in who I was. But I watched her with new eyes. Every smile. Every word. Every moment of kindness. Now seen through a lens of potential betrayal. Then Mark called. We dug through her communications. Every email, text, and call we could legally access. "You're not going to like this." My stomach turned. She visited a federal prison. 2 months ago. Which one? The one housing Claire. I closed my eyes. A storm swelled behind my ribcage. I confronted her that night. No games. No soft entry. Just looked her dead in the eye and said, "You visited my wife." She blinked. No denial. No panic. Just a long, steady breath. Yes. I stepped back, my voice cold. Why? I needed to see her, she said quietly. To understand the weight of what you went through. The truth. The depth of it. You had to talk to her to understand that. I wasn't going to take your story at face value and pretend I got it. I needed to see what kind of monster could do that to someone like you. I needed to see it for myself, not through headlines. Not through your words. With my own eyes. She held my stare. She's broken, Ethan. Rotting. And I wanted to see what that looked like before I committed to standing beside the man she tried to destroy. I didn't know what to say. My instinct screamed one thing, run. But another part, the part I'd locked down for over a year, whispered, she didn't lie. She chose truth over comfort. The next morning, Mark followed up. She left the visit without contact. Didn't accept letters. Didn't take anything from Claire. Didn't respond to follow-ups. She wasn't trying to rekindle anything. I nodded slowly. Processing. She went to confront the devil. And she walked away. That night, I invited Emily back to the lake house. No wine. No music. Just a single sentence waiting on the tip of my tongue. You passed. She smiled. Not smug, not proud. Just calm. I wasn't being tested. But she was. And she didn't just pass. She cleared the rubble. Peace was not something I trusted easily. It felt foreign. Temporary. Like a pause between storms. But after Emily stood her ground, after she proved she wasn't another masked manipulator, something inside me settled. Not all at once. It didn't come with some grand emotional breakthrough. It came in smaller ways. Waking up and not checking every corner of the room. Letting silence fill a space without needing to cut it with words. Eating dinner across from someone who wasn't calculating my net worth with every bite. The lake house became something new. Not a fortress. Not a hiding place. A home. Emily never pressed. She didn't ask when I'd move on or when I'd let it go. She knew, better than most, that some wounds don't scab over. Some scars just become part of you. But still, she didn't treat me like I was broken. She treated me like I was forged. And I think that's what I needed all along. Not healing, but recognition. Mark noticed the shift. You seem different, he said over coffee one morning. Different how? Less angry. Less guarded. Like the flame still burning. But now you're using it to light something instead of torching everything. I thought about that. He wasn't wrong. Vengeance had defined me for so long that I forgot what it felt like to live without it. But now I was starting to feel something else. Purpose. I started consulting again. Quietly. Selectively. Helping others who'd been targeted by spouses, partners, legal traps. Not for money. Not for revenge. To equip them. So they never had to rebuild from ashes like I did. Emily supported it. Encouraged it. You're turning pain into a weapon, she said. But not for destruction, for defense. That's rare. I didn't respond. Just nodded. Because she was right again. One day, I received another letter. Prison return address. Different handwriting. Randall. He'd heard about my new work. Knew I was helping others. His message was simple, a request. When I get out, I'd like to be one of the people you help. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because he still didn't get it. Redemption isn't handed out like a sandwich. You earn it. And he hadn't even started. I tore the letter in half. Emily found the pieces later, tucked into the trash. She didn't ask, just placed a hand on my shoulder and kissed the side of my face. And in that moment, I realized something important. Claire and Randall were the war. But Emily was the peace treaty I never thought I'd get. It started with a knock at my office door. Not at home. Not through an email. Not a scheduled appointment. Just a cold, rainy afternoon and a visitor I hadn't seen in years. Lucy, Claire's sister. Same sharp eyes. Same flawless posture. But no designer handbag. No curated persona. Just a soaked coat, trembling fingers, and something I never expected to see in anyone from her side of the family. Fear. I didn't invite her in. I stood behind my desk and waited. You've got 30 seconds, I said. She swallowed hard. It's about Claire. I raised an eyebrow. She's got decades to figure herself out. Why are you here? She looked down, twisting the ring on her finger. She's deteriorating. Mentally. She's been placed in isolation 3 times this year. She barely speaks. She stopped eating last month. I crossed my arms. Let me guess, now that your golden sister can't bankroll your lifestyle, you're hoping I'll step in. Her eyes snapped up. No, this isn't about money. I said nothing. She talks about you, Lucy continued. All the time. Sometimes she thinks you're still married. Sometimes she screams that you're standing in the room trying to kill her. I didn't blink. She keeps asking for Belle. I flinched before I could stop myself. Belle. My niece by blood. My daughter in every way that mattered. The one I saved from Claire's manipulative grip during the custody fallout. The one I raised far, far away from all this chaos. I hadn't told her the full story. Only what she was old enough to handle. But she'd asked about her mother once, and I saw in her eyes that small, burning ache for something lost. Lucy took a step forward. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for truth. She's dying in there, Ethan. And she's lost in a world she can't escape. I don't care if you hate her, I get it. But Belle might need closure one day. And you should decide how she gets it. I finally spoke. You want me to visit Claire? No. I want you to control the ending. I sat on that for weeks. Emily noticed the shift. She didn't pry, just left a note on my desk one morning. You don't owe anyone mercy, but you owe yourself closure. A month later, I made the call. Arranged a visit. Not to offer comfort. Not to forgive. But to see for myself what becomes of someone who gambled everything on betrayal and lost. When I walked into that room, Claire barely looked human. Eyes sunken. Hair brittle. Posture slack. The same woman who once mocked me from ivory towers now sat in a plastic chair, muttering to herself like a ghost stuck between worlds. She looked up, and for a second, she recognized me. Ethan, she whispered. You're here. I didn't respond. She smiled. A crooked, broken thing. You came back. I knew you would. She reached out slow, shaking. I didn't take her hand. I leaned in close and said what I came to say. You died the day you chose greed over love. I'm just here to make sure the world remembers. Then I turned and walked out. She didn't call after me. She just started laughing. Soft. Hollow. Like a record player spinning on an empty groove. After that final visit to Claire, I drove straight home without speaking a word. Not to the guards. Not to the driver. Not to Emily, when she opened the door and saw that look in my eyes. She knew where I'd been. She just wrapped her arms around me. No questions, no judgment. And in that silence, something finally broke free inside me. The last tether. The final ghost. Gone. That night, I sat in my office and stared at an old photo of Belle. It was taken back when she was 8, one of those carefree snapshots where kids don't realize they're carrying the weight of shattered families behind their smiles. I remembered the day I took her in. The way she clung to my leg, terrified, unsure of who to trust anymore. Claire had left more than just financial ruin in her wake. She tried to turn her daughter into a bargaining chip, another piece in her strategy to keep control. But I didn't let that happen. I fought for Belle. Quietly. Ruthlessly. And I won. She was 16 now. Smart. Strong. Sarcastic in all the best ways. She had Emily's patience and my stubborn streak, a lethal combination. That weekend, I brought her to the lake house and told her everything. No sugarcoating. No edited version. From the coma, to Claire's plot, to the courtroom. She listened. Didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Just said, I always knew something was off about her. I just didn't know it had a body count. I laughed. It wasn't funny, but it was honest. Then she asked the one question I wasn't sure I could answer. Do I have her in me? I looked her dead in the eye. You have her blood, but you've got my fire. And fire burns through anything, even poison. She nodded. And that was it. From that point on, I stopped running. Stopped hiding. I started building again, this time with Belle and Emily beside me. Not just businesses. Not just trust funds and legal shields. A legacy. A foundation for victims of financial betrayal. Scholarships for children caught in custody nightmares. Programs to train people how to spot the red flags, the subtle cues that saved my life once I knew how to read them. We named it the Garrison Line. Because I'd been laid out. But I hadn't been broken. And neither would the next soul who came knocking.